Hello and welcome to another episode of Movies That Make Us. I'm Jake.
I'm Tracy.
And I'm Robert.
And Robert, welcome.
Welcome aboard, sir.
I know I don't look anything like Val, so I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Val will be joining us a little bit later. She just is going to be a little bit late, and that's fine. So she will pop in when she gets here, and I'm sure we'll jump right into the conversation and everything will be fine. But we appreciate that. And we appreciate you being here, Robert. We're always glad to see you.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
I do feel, though, with you here and with Tracy here, I need to change my hairstyle just a little bit.
No pressure for me.
Yeah,
I think you look just
almost
fine.
beautiful.
Well, not
Plus,
just...
you got to grow out the facial hair a little bit.
Yeah.
There's also that.
So...
I could see you doing that before you shave your head.
Yeah, I would... I used to wear a beard pretty regularly, actually.
Really?
So, yeah.
Oh, wow.
But my current employer does not allow beards as part of the dress code, so I don't, and that's fine.
So what about Lee press-on beard?
Yeah,
Ooh.
There you go. Just bring it for the show and then take it off.
There you go.
It'll create like a secret identity for me. That'll work really well. So before we get oh, go ahead, Tracy. Sorry.
I was just going to say, how was everybody's week been? Anything fun?
Took our girls to ice cream for report cards. That was fun.
There you go.
That's great. They must have done well on their report cards then.
They did well on report cards.
That's awesome.
No, we reward really bad work around it though.
Well, I went to the big town of Lincoln, Nebraska for a couple days for a business trip.
I'm sorry.
It was actually kind of a cute little city, but
did you fly or did you drive?
Flew. So we had to fly into Denver and then on a little plane, and then get on an even littler plane and fly into Lincoln.
You should have flown to Omaha.
That's probably so.
If you have to do it again, fly to Omaha. It's only an hour.
Yeah,
an hour drive. Yeah,
probably get a direct flight to Omaha easier than Lincoln.
I didn't make the travel arrangements, so I just showed up. But I
enough.
did. I got to tell you guys, I tried. There was this little ice cream shop close by the hotel, and so I stopped by and got a sample, and that's all I needed. I didn't need more than a spoonful, but I got the Thanksgiving dinner ice cream, which was a black pepper ice cream with sage stuffing and cranberry swirls, and it was actually kind of good, but I don't think that I could have had more than a spoonful.
It reminds me of the Willy Wonka gum from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Mm-hmm.
Just some things shouldn't be in that format, but
it was Thanksgiving dinner, but cold. It was odd, but it was kind of compelling. I don't know.
That's just what I eat on Friday. It's Thanksgiving dinner, but cold. We call that leftovers.
Most people do, but I mean, Tracy's, if Tracy was to redefine it as Thanksgiving dinner but cold, sure.
Yeah,
we'll allow that.
We'll let it slide.
So that was my fun time this weekend.
So before we get into anything, we do want to remind everybody to like this video if you're watching it on YouTube and subscribe. We want to do that up front. We want to be better about reminding you to do that. That just is good for us and good for you. So also, Tracy, what's going on next week? Or this week? It'll be this week when this comes out. Yeah,
you're right. Friday evening, we're going to be live over at the Midway Tavern. We'll be 21 plus, so you have to be 21 or older to join us. But we'll be doing Disney trivia, holding raffle prizes. We've got anything from a smoker to a signed football from U of U coach Whittingham. We've got some Disney stuff from Thomas Estrada. I've got a signed Funko from the actress who played Mirabelle in Encanto. We've got all sorts of stuff that we're going to be giving away. Just ask for a donation to go to the American Cancer Society. We're trying to raise $5,000. We're about $850 away or so. So we're really close. We're hoping this can help push this over the edge.
And we would love to get there that night and get over the 5,000. We also understand not everybody's going to be able to make it for whatever reason. So we have posted on our Facebook page, pinned at the top, the link where you can go and donate to the fundraiser that Tracy's got going on to help him get over that $5,000 hump. So if you can't make it, totally understand. Go ahead and donate there if you can. If you can't do either of those things, if you share it, that helps too.
That helps, absolutely. And
So-
you can make as little as $1 donation. I mean, everything helps. Every donation, 100% of it goes to the American Cancer Society. There's no skimming off the top. There's no anything like that. So everything goes to ACS, which is great.
Awesome. Well, you asked how this week went, Tracy, and I'll be honest, one of the highlights is probably what we're going to talk about today.
Nice.
We all went and saw Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Robert, you and I got to go Wednesday night and see it on IMAX. It was awesome.
Ooh, on
It was
IMAX
loud.
and early, and I missed it.
Yeah.
It was so loud. Oh good lord.
It was
So loud.
really loud. But
Jake had to put up with my crying children. It was lovely.
your kids are not. They were wonderful. They were wonderful. There was a little bit of a anyway, the
There's
seats
some
were
emotional spots.
yeah. Yeah, oh there are a lot of emotional spots. Somebody posted on a Facebook group that I'm a part of, or page that I follow. I hope that Black Panther Wakanda Forever is dedicated to Chadwick Boseman. It is, and there is zero doubt. Zero doubt.
The thing is, at both the beginning and the end, they make no question about that.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the Marvel, much like they did with Stan Lee, did a special bump at the beginning with their Marvel Studios logo, where it's all Chadwick Boseman.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I thought
like,
that
oh,
was a really nice gesture.
Well, and I liked that they did that, and then it was quiet. There was no music going on, and
Yes.
that really kind of drove it home as
Yeah.
well. And then we get basically the same footage at the end with Shuri as she's
Mhm.
sitting on the beach there. So yeah, there's no doubt this is absolutely dedicated to him, to his memory, to T'Challa and his memory. And I think they do a great job paying homage to both the character and the actor right up front and throughout the movie. That was my
Agreed.
feeling on it. So if you're worried about that, it is absolutely
Don't.
dedicated to him. If you're worried about it because you don't want it to be, then yeah, sorry, you're going to be super disappointed.
Spoilers.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marvel does a good job. They're kind of a classy organization
Sometimes, usually, most of the time.
most of the time. Yeah.
You mentioned spoilers, Robert. We should probably say up front, we are probably going to spoil things in this movie, and that's why we're not going live today. We don't want anyone to come across this by accident on our Facebook feed and have something spoiled. There will be spoilers in this. If you haven't seen it, please go and see it. Then come back and watch this episode because we would hate for anyone to have their experience ruined because they watched our show. Right? That's
Absolutely.
fair. That's fair. So,
Okay, so now you've been warned. Game on.
yeah, exactly. Now the warning's out there.
Warning's out there. Go
And
time.
so if you haven't changed yet, get ready to have it spoiled. Although I will say, I don't know that we'll spoil it anymore on this show more than the trailers and the toys and the merchandise spoiled it. To be fair.
I was able to avoid most of the spoilers. I didn't look at any of the toy sets, or the Lego set seemed to really give stuff away lately. So I've definitely stayed away from that.
Yeah.
The Lego sets were the ones that spoiled it first, actually. And it was like, well, and I actually avoided seeing it. I just read a headline and said, nope. But yeah, they were like a month and a half ago when they spoiled theirs.
Yeah.
Dang. So since we are talking spoilers, what's the set?
It was Shuri's Sunbird. And
Okay.
one of the figures is Shuri in the habit.
Oh, okay.
Not too dissimilar from this.
Yeah.
Yeah. But and it was one of those that you're just like, well, no question there what's going to happen.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people kind of guessed that's what was going to happen in the movie anyway, that the mantle was going to pass to Shuri, but
still there was still some possibilities. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So but that's the way marketing seems to go nowadays anyway. It feels like
Thanks, Lego.
the very end, the mid-credit scene, that was not spoiled anyway
That
at
was
all.
great.
No.
That was a surprise and a pleasant one, but I think most of what happens in the movie, I don't think is a surprise, or it didn't feel too surprising to me.
Shouldn't be.
Yeah, there weren't a lot of
Yeah.
twists and turns.
Yeah. Which is fine. Sometimes I don't mind going to see a movie and not having a lot of
I
twists and
will
turns.
argue that there weren't twists and turns, because there was one that was a big surprise for me that I did not expect them to do. And we can get into that later as we get further into the movie.
Mhm.
But there was one thing they did that I did not see coming. And I'm like, well, that just happened, and that's going to have repercussions.
Okay, cool.
Now I'm intrigued to
I
see
know.
what.
I'm like, I
And
kind
I
of want
saw
to
the movie.
deep into that.
I've seen it twice now. So, one thing that I will say, so I took my daughter to see it on Wednesday. She enjoyed it quite a bit.
Mhm.
I took my oldest son and my youngest son to see it on Friday, and my youngest is 6.
Uh-huh.
This movie did not hold his attention.
Mm.
I for most of it. Now, when we got toward the end and we got into a lot of the battles and things like that, then he was all in. But a lot of it, the talking and the discussions and everything, that was really kind of boring for him. We had 3 bathroom breaks, which is a lot. I was glad that I had seen it on Wednesday so that I could take him and not worry about what I was missing. So I think just be aware of that. Like, it may not be younger kids. It may be better to wait until it's on Disney Plus or
I
whatnot to
can see
watch it with
that.
them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me
Or
also
take it
add,
at a time when you don't mind.
as I mentioned earlier, we took my girls to go see it. My girls are 11, and their attention was held, but one of my daughters is very sensitive to deaths of certain
Okay.
types and a lot of conflict, or certain
Mm.
types of conflict. And this was, I guess you would call it, kind of triggering for her in a number of those situations.
Mm.
Sure.
I knew going in that they're going to be dealing with T'Challa's death at some point, and I kind of expected that to be at the beginning of the movie. So like, there's going to be a sad part at the beginning of the movie, just to let both girls know what to expect going in.
Yeah.
And there was much more that came later. It was like, whoa,
Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah. There was more than I
don't stab me in my sleep.
Yeah.
expected.
Yeah. And I kind of did the same thing with my youngest, because when he found out, and this was just a few months ago that he found out that Chadwick had passed away, that the actor who played Black Panther,
Mm.
he was, for a good few minutes, was pretty inconsolable. Like, he just couldn't
Oh.
understand how that could happen.
Mhm.
And so I tried to prepare him, like, hey, just so you know, in the beginning, they're talking about T'Challa being sick and dying, and because I wanted him to know that up front.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and so, uh, but yeah, I wasn't, there was more in the movie for sure.
So I mentioned that I'm wearing this for a reason. So I'll go ahead and
Yes.
get to this because it does cover part of what we're going into now. So the reason I'm wearing this is because T'Challa's first appearance was in Fantastic Four number 52.
Okay.
So this was in 1966. So that was his first appearance, but also because, uh, I've got my Black Panther T-shirt.
That is cool.
Nice.
However, it's not T-shirt weather here in Utah, so I needed
No,
something else.
it is,
Uh,
that
there's a
is,
secondary reason that I'm wearing it. It's because of this guy,
yeah.
who also appears prominently in Fantastic Four and causes problems of many kinds and many shades for them. So it was one of those dual tribute kind of things that I figured this is a good way to stay warm and respect the movie and its characters.
Yeah.
Works on so many levels.
Yeah. Namor typically appears in Fantastic Four. Man, he's been around so long in the Marvel universe because he predates Marvel
1940.
Comics.
Yeah. He
Yeah.
predates Aquaman.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's 1940 in Marvel Mystery Comics number 4.
Yeah. And so he's been around forever. So he's touched but he ties in a lot with the Fantastic Four. I think for a while he's got a thing for Sue Storm,
He still
which
does.
Reed doesn't appreciate very much.
He still doesn't.
Yeah. So you got that going on, but he's also been tied in with the X-Men from time to time. When the Phoenix
Which
Force
also ties
came
into
in,
the movie. Yep.
yes, when the Phoenix Force comes in and it's AVX, he's part of the group that gets the Phoenix Force with Cyclops and Emma Frost and things like that. So he's he's just been all over the place in the Marvel universe, and so but this is a very interesting take on the character because it's very different than
Yeah.
what we get in the comics.
Well, and I was really glad to see that this was completely different than DC's Aquaman,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're really similar in a lot of ways, and so I thought it was really cool, instead of it being Atlantis, that they created this new world, but it's
Talokan.
very Mesoamerica based, which I thought was really interesting because you don't get much representation there.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
that was an interesting choice, I thought, on Marvel and Ryan Coogler's part, to not just take the character and bring him into the movie, but to also um, give him that background of Mesoamerican, because quite frankly, Namor is kind of like one note, one shot, you know, curse the surface world,
Right.
and I swim really fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this one gave him character. It gave him that they did a fantastic job, in my opinion, of giving him an actual motivation for
Yeah.
why he distrusts the surface world, and that was huge.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then getting to see him, and you're mentioning how he's different from Aquaman. You get to see him from the beginning, how he feels about his people, how he cares for them, and how they feel about him. And
Right.
it was, I mean, that whole thing I thought was beautiful the way they handled that.
Yeah. Yeah. With Aquaman, what we've seen in the movies so far, he's a very reluctant leader
Yeah.
of his
Well, most of
people
the
of
heroes in
Atlantis.
the DC universe are.
Well, but he's reluctant to like want to lead his people
Yeah.
too. Like he doesn't want to be their king. Whereas Namor that we see here in Wakanda Forever, like he is
Very
very
dedicated.
dedicated to his people, and that's a big motivation for him.
And it was
And
also
I
interesting how he got his name, how they gave him his name in here.
yeah,
And I thought
Mhm.
that was, that was kind of fascinating, to just kind of turn something that was a curse basically into, I'm going to own this,
Mhm.
yeah,
and you will respect me as such. And I was like, very strong move on the writing part there.
yeah, I thought so too. 'Cause I'm like, I know this isn't his backstory, and that's not where his name comes from at all in the comics,
Mhm.
but I'm
Mm.
down with it. Like this gives him a little bit more motivation. And you mentioned too, Robert, he's not just curse the surface world. He is, but he's got reasons and motivation for it
Yeah.
besides just, oh, they're dumping our garbage into the ocean, which is
Right.
fine. I get that's
Mm.
a great motivation, but this is so much more because when he goes
Yeah,
back to bury his mom and seeing what they've done to the people, the native people in that land.
Right. And to me, that it's interesting because Wakanda is a country that never got colonized, that
hmm,
never got a, slavery and enslaved and dispersed. And so when you think about what happened in Mesoamerican culture, and South American culture, and then you compare it to what happened with African Americans, there's a lot of similarities there that I thought the film handled really, really well.
Yeah.
true. And I think that in its own way, I think that the parallel that I'm not sure was truly intentional, but if it was, I think it's a masterstroke to show Talokan as kind of a Mesoamerican Wakanda, because those people left,
Hmm.
the rest of the civilization to form their own thing, and for what, 400 years at this point,
Yeah.
had survived and thrived. And I think that there was, I'm sure that somebody thought this would be a nice little twisty thing, but if it wasn't, that was a beautiful bit of luck on their part.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I liked the similarities and I thought that it made it intriguing as they discussed. And there's a lot of nuances with the characters and their motivations and what is driving them, from Shuri to Namor to, none of the characters, in my opinion, felt really one dimensional in this for the most part.
Mhm.
The main characters, I felt like they all were really, really complex, which was nice to see because a lot of times in these movies, you get the main core that are pretty
Yeah.
complex, and then everybody else is really one dimensional. And I didn't feel
Mhm.
that way for the most part in this. I mean, when you get to the really fringe side characters like Namora and Atuma, like there's not a
Atuma.
lot of development there, but for the most part, the core, I think there is, and I think it's really nice to see. Coogler's a great storyteller, and I think that this shows
Mhm.
again how great he is at telling these kinds of stories and how respectful he is to uh, different cultures and histories and backgrounds. And I think that that comes through in his storytelling quite a bit.
Yeah.
So can I use that as a jumping off point for something else?
Great.
And I think I'm the only person really qualified here to make this comment. Sorry,
Okay.
guys. The scene where they're doing T'Challa's funeral
Uh,
is would be referred to in a lot of Afro-American and Black Canadian culture as a homegoing service,
Okay.
as opposed to a funeral,
okay.
because he's returning to the ancestors. He's going home. It's not just, he's dead. We're mourning him. We're rejoicing and celebrating his life. And it's, excuse me, it is a fairly common depiction. Well, I'd say it's a stylized depiction because you're also getting a more African influence
Mm-hmm.
of how they're doing it. But it's a celebration of life, and we were, we were proud to have this person in our lives for this time, and we celebrate them as they go in their next phase of the journey. And you don't see that in a lot of Western cultures,
Hmm.
where
Right.
a funeral is very somber, very staid kind of thing. It's very formal.
Mm-hmm.
And even though they had their rituals, they were celebrating their champion, their king, and their brother as he moved on to be with the ancestors.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting scene, and I appreciate that kind of explanation on it, because when you look at a lot of the people in the village as they're moving through with the casket, it is almost a celebration.
They're
Really, I mean,
dancing in the
people are
streets and
they're smiling and dancing, and even down to they're all dressed in white as opposed to black, and it's a
yeah.
big juxtaposition to what when I think of a funeral, someone moving on,
Mhm.
it's a very different experience. Um,
Yeah, and I was when they showed that, I think they showed clips of it in the trailers, and when I saw it, I'm kind of like, that's something that definitely say is for the culture, and
Uh-huh.
also to kind of broaden other people's awareness of, yeah, funerals for different cultures are not all the same,
right.
and this comes the homegoing ceremony definitely comes from a lot of African traditions and especially during the slavery era, because it was
Uh-huh.
thought that when the slaves were died, their souls would fly back to Africa and
Mm-hmm.
return home to be at peace. And it's kind of evolved over the years to going to be with God, going to be in heaven, and it's you've fought your battle, your journey is done, well done. We celebrate your life. So
That's lovely.
seeing that on the big screen was very touching in that sense.
I think that's a much healthier way too. I've always felt like it should be more of a celebration of someone's life and achievements. And I mean, yes, you're upset and you're sad that they've left you, but I think that's a much I think I gravitate towards that more if I can say the word. So yeah, thank you for that, Robert.
Mhm.
I will say too that the emotion that we get from Ramonda and from Shuri in that scene too
Wow.
is incredibly powerful. And throughout, Shuri carries this movie a lot.
Hmm.
And I mean, Ramonda does as well, but Shuri really, this character comes into her own in this movie, and rightfully
Yeah.
so. Obviously, this is her origin story of how
Right.
she,
Mhm.
spoilers, becomes Black Panther. But yeah,
Lego spoiled it a month and a half ago.
and we already gave a warning, so
Touche.
but her character should be coming into her own, but
Right.
she carries this movie so well, and I was really impressed with her performance throughout.
Yeah. And then I mean Angela Bassett. I mean, just
Yeah.
I've been a fan of hers. The first time I think I saw her, I was in college and film school, and we got a screener. I worked at a video store, so we'd get movies before they came out. And I got a screener of a movie called Strange Days, and she's in it with Ray Fiennes, and she blew me away. And I've been a fan of hers ever since. And she never disappoints. But man, she brought it in this film. I mean, just
She
the
totally did.
everybody really. I mean, just the amount of pain and sadness, but yet this determination to carry on. I just thought it was lovely.
The scene where she's in front of the United Nations and talking with them was incredible. And, you know, standing up to Toby Ziegler. I don't know the actor's name, but that's the character from Westworld. Yes.
Who was delighted to see him, like, oh my God, it's Toby. Wait, no, Richard Shep got it. Okay.
Although there were points where it's like, freaking Toby, come on, man. but where she is like, you know, we know what you whisper in your halls. We know you're saying that the Black Panther is dead, the king is dead, they're without their protector. And like, it was so powerful because you can tell she was strong and she was protective and she was not going to let anything happen to Wakanda. And
she was going to let them know that nothing was going to happen to Wakanda.
Yeah. And having that at the same time, you're seeing what happened when somebody broke in to try to steal the vibranium, and then they get caught, and then they bring them and march them onto the floor of the United Nations. I'm like, she's not messing around, guys.
Not only that, but the fact that she sat there and listened to both, you know, the United States and the French ambassadors just rail on, you know, well, this. And she just sat there the entire time, just like, okay. And when it was her time to speak, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't get outraged. It was just like, so let me tell you something. And then read them the riot act very calmly and said, by the way, we got something that you lost. And marches, you know, the Dora marched the guys in.
Yeah.
And she's just kind of like,
yeah. It was awesome. And you're right, she doesn't raise her voice there. And throughout the movie, there's kind of this controlled, like, below the surface tempest that you can tell is there. But and Angela Bassett's amazing, and she just does a great job playing that up. And so then the moment when she lets loose on Okoye is that much more powerful, because throughout the whole movie she's been controlled and tempered and very queenly, and she still was in that moment, but when she gets emotional there, it makes it that much more powerful.
Yeah. But also in that moment, it was finally the breaking point for her. And you could see that Okoye was trying to be diplomatic.
Right.
And the fact that, to be honest, she wasn't wrong. However, the tempest that you mentioned, that seething under the surface, has been bubbling for a year now.
Right.
And then the incursion into Wakanda from Namor was the final piece of just like, I'm done. I've played nice. We're done here. And unfortunately, the target of her temper was Okoye.
Yeah.
And it was just like, and Okoye, to be fair, I think the way that they handled her reaction to being just unloaded on in front of everybody was every bit the general that we had seen in the previous Black Panther movie, in the Avengers movies. And it fit her, the way that she was like, okay, because it was very much in keeping with the way that when Killmonger took the throne, like, I serve Wakanda. And it's like, not who sits on the throne, it's Wakanda. And when the ruler of Wakanda tells me I failed at my job, I can't argue.
Yeah.
Right.
And she took it with, I would say, as much grace as a person can in that situation.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And one thing that you had mentioned before, Robert, that I've been thinking of a lot lately is that Phase 4 is all about grieving and picking up the
grief
pieces
and loss and trauma
of what happened, starting with Endgame. Well, really with what first started with the Infinity War with the blip. But I mean, you're absolutely right. And what a way to finish out Phase 4 with this film, because that nails it on the head. That puts the exclamation point at the end of the sentence.
And I was talking with my wife earlier, and I was saying, we were talking about how this, like you just said, was the end of Phase 4, and how the phase has been dealing with trauma, grief, and loss. And I think it is the perfect bookend to WandaVision, because if you look at the beginning of Phase 4 with WandaVision, we're dealing with a first-hand character, a first-hand Avengers dealing with her loss and her grief, or not dealing with it. And the fact that they used comedy to portray that was fantastic, but you're still kind of like, she's dealing with something here. And
Mhm.
all of the movies, all of the TV series through this arc or phase 4 have been dealing with the same thing. I think that this one is the most explosive
Yeah.
trauma way that they're dealing with trauma, the most visibly explosive. And it's not just Ramonda at Okoye. It's not just Shuri dealing with everybody around her. And Shuri is kind of manic through this because she's got guilt, she's got loss, she's got
Mhm.
all these things that she's dealing with. And am I good enough to move forward
Right.
with all of these things on my shoulders? And Namor's loss and the fact that he was, people would call him ruthless. I would say that he was just very assertive and direct. And like,
Mhm.
I don't care what you say, what you do. This is how it's going to be, which is straight out of the comics for him.
Oh
It's
yeah.
it's I've spoken, and that's just the way it's going to be.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I don't
I
know the
think that
character.
going from oh, I think that going from WandaVision, where it's a slow burn to get to Wanda's somewhat dealing with the grief, but we really don't even get that until Multiverse of Madness.
Right.
And then here it's everybody's dealing with this one thing, and it's all of the ripple effects of that, and then it just explodes. Excuse me, explodes in so many different ways for so many different people, and it's just like, wow, I'm glad this phase is over now. I don't think I can take another.
Yeah. Phase 4 has been an interesting phase, and I think a lot of people have really struggled with phase 4 because it
Mhm.
is very different from what we saw in phase 3 that went up through Endgame. And now phase 4 really is picking up the pieces after what happened in Endgame. That was a really
Yeah.
hard for everybody involved, the fans included. Obviously not
Mhm.
as hard for us because we were just watching it, not experiencing it. But I think it's been really difficult for people to get through because I don't know what we wanted necessarily, but I think dealing with grief and loss was not what people really wanted to do, but it's what the characters
Uh-huh.
needed to do. We had to get there to get to phase 5 and whatever the next thing is that comes.
Right.
But I think
Right.
that part of it, like you're saying, part of it is not just the audience, but the characters. And I don't think that you could have an event like the snap and the blip
Mhm.
and not deal with it. I mean, there have been things that we've
Right.
seen
Right.
in universe that haven't been dealt with it, like just another Thursday, Hand in the Ocean. But but you know, I think that this was necessary to see the characters for their development. To be honest, and to be
Uh-huh.
fair, we haven't even seen most of the mainstream Avengers and how they've dealt with this. And I
Right.
think that when we get to the next phase and we start seeing, who's left and them, I really want to hear that at least one of them, outside of Bucky and Sam, have been in therapy
Yeah.
That'd be great.
or
Yeah.
have just had a hard time coping at least.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this almost hits doubly hard for Wakanda and for T'Challa and his family because he was wiped out of existence during the blip. He's gone for 5 years, comes back, and then develops this mystery illness and then leaves again. And that's,
Mhm.
I mean, that's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And that's where Ramonda's emotional restraint and then explosion all
Mhm.
come into play.
And I know that there's been talk out there that Ryan Coogler had a script or a story, not I don't know about a script, but a story idea for where we were going to go before Chadwick's passing, and that was going to be
Mhm.
how does he deal with he was gone for 5 years and now he comes back to the kingdom and things like that. And I think that's what most of Phase 4 has had to be is okay, how
Yeah.
do we deal
Mhm.
with if we were gone for 5 years and now we're back all of a sudden, and how does that look and what does the world look like? Um, but and that leads to the question that's kind of been out there. Disney had to make a choice. Marvel had to make a choice. Do we recast the character T'Challa and move forward with
Right.
our original story idea, or do we not recast it and have to go back and come up with a different story and go in a different direction. And you've got one group of fans that felt like they made the right decision by not recasting and by going and moving forward with the character. And then you have another group of fans that feel like you're dishonoring somehow T'Challa by not recasting it and bringing that character back. What are your guys' thoughts now that you've seen the movie? Did that change how you felt about the decision that they made? Do you feel like they made the right decision? What are your thoughts?
I'm gonna let Tracy go first.
Okay. I thought that was the correct move. I think when you've got somebody of Chadwick Boseman's, not just his acting ability, but I mean I'm not the right person to talk about this, but I have seen reaction videos and I've read essays and about how much this movie changed people because it was a representation of their color up on the screen that has been not shown nearly enough. And to know what kind of person Chadwick was and what kind of decency he had, I think it was the right thing to do to not recast. And now with the we have a new Black Panther, and then with the end credit we have T'Challa's son, which they may or may not bring in the future. That's up to whatever they're going to do. But I thought that was a really graceful and well done move on Marvel's part.
Okay, well, let's follow that up. Wow. Maybe I shouldn't let you go first. No, I think that it was the right call. We've seen that Marvel is not afraid to recast Edward Norton to Mark Ruffalo, Terrence Howard to Don Cheadle. They're not afraid to recast, or in certain cases even to use an actor in two different roles, like Gemma Chan in both Captain Marvel and the Eternals. So they're not afraid to make those choices. However, given the way that Chadwick Boseman portrayed and embodied T'Challa, and not just on screen, but if you look at his work, knowing that he had advanced stage cancer, said nothing about it, and the grace and nobility with which he carried himself off screen, going to visit children in the hospital, doing press junkets, the whole 9 yards, and just being Chadwick Boseman, representing himself and his company, his character. I think that by not going back and going, we're going to just throw another body at this.
Yeah.
I think that would have been the entirely wrong move. I think that would have been disrespectful to the memory of what he did and what he brought to that character. And, Ryan Coogler and his writing team as well, how they brought that character to the page for him to bring to the screen, and the way that he was able to carry that and advance it. And not just, if you even look at in Captain America, the Winter Soldier, the scenes where he's working with John Conney as T'Chaka at the United Nations before the explosion. Boseman went. Pardon me? Civil War. You are right. It is Civil War. I apologize. It is Civil War. But when they were running the scenes for that, Boseman was, they were talking in English in certain parts, and then Boseman was like, "That doesn't feel right. What can we do to make the sound more natural?" And he had them rewrite part of his script in Xhosa, which was John Connie's native language, which is what Wakandan is derived from, which is what they actually write that. And he's like, this makes this more realistic and more has more gravitas to it. And not a lot of actors would have had that thought of, what can we do to make this more resonant and to make it work properly. And he was just like, no, we do this. So they rewrote part of his dialogue, and it wasn't a lot of it, but it was just enough to go, he learned that to converse with Connie in his native language. And, his thoughts, the fact that T'Challa spoke with the accent he did was also Chadwick Boseman's choice, because he's like, if a country has not been colonized, they're not going to have all of these things in their language. So they're not going to sound like everybody else on the continent.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
that was my little. Thank you for coming to my TED talk. Sorry.
No, that was great.
That was awesome. Yeah.
So yes, I too long didn't read. Yes, they made the right call by not recasting.
I agree. I was really pleased with how they told this story, and to me, I felt like they really, you could tell everybody that was involved really brought it in this. Like they wanted this to be a good
Uh-huh.
movie and a good story, and
And to live up to his
yeah.
honor. One thing
Well,
I watched an interview with some of the actresses, and they said when they were doing the fight choreography for the first Black Panther, Chadwin brought in a friend of his who was a drummer, and he would drum, and they would base their fight moves off the rhythm of the drumming. And they brought him back for this one because they felt like we have to. This is something Chadwick brought to us. We've got to have this in there. So just stuff like that, I think, was just, you can tell how much this man made a difference in these people's lives. This wasn't just, I was in a movie with him. This was a man who changed people that he encountered. And it's obvious on the screen. This is real pain, but real healing and real moving forward as well.
agreed. I actually follow some of the Dora actors on social media, and for the past year and a half since Chadwick's, his death,
Uh-huh.
their grief, watching them grieve in real time, and then realize we still have to come back and deal with this, and all of them acknowledging we're not okay with it. We're not okay
Right.
in real time, both in their real lives, and then having to you know tamp that down a bit to be able to make this movie. And I think that all of the expressions of emotion that we saw from everybody involved who was in the first movie, we see that on the screen. And I think that it's I think it's also a bit of catharsis because
Yeah.
they get to publicly and share with us their grief and their love of this man who, like Tracy said, changed their lives in many cases,
Yeah.
transformed them in
Mhm.
in fundamental ways.
Yeah. And I think everyone, well, most people, I would hope, expected that we were going to be grieving T'Challa,
Yeah.
we'd be grieving Chadwick in this. I don't think any of us necessarily expected that we were going to be grieving Ramonda.
No,
Oh,
that was the point I was going to make. That was the they did what?
that's true.
And
That's
Yeah.
that
true.
happened. It was like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
I
I wasn't
That was the
expecting that. Yeah.
that was a shock to say the least. No pun intended. Um, there's like I expected her to be Queen Mother in
mhm,
perpetuity, and it was just
Mhm.
like, no. Well, that's different.
yeah.
Well, it really added a new level to Shuri because she's already told her mom that if I sit and think of
Uh-oh.
Oh no,
I think Tracy froze.
okay, sorry.
No,
Um
you're good. You're back now.
you're back.
yeah. So basically she says if I sit and think about my brother and what we've gone through, I'm not going to burn his clothes. I'm going to burn down the world. And now she's lost her mother on top of that, and that really gives her allowing Namor to yield at the end even more gravitas and power.
Well, I think that not. I mean, look at what she has lost, and it's the same as Ramonda, with an exception of Ramonda being included. But in a 6-year span, she lost her brother twice. I'm sorry, she
Yeah.
lost her father, lost her brother twice,
Mhm.
and has guilt over the second one that she couldn't
Mhm.
do anything or wasn't ready to do anything, and then loses her mother,
Yeah.
a year after her brother. The fact that she had the ability to be compassionate to Namor
Mhm.
and to be the leader that the Wakandans needed at that
Mhm.
point, to try and find a noble solution speaks volumes to how she dealt with her inner conflict.
Yeah. Well, and in the beginning she wasn't. I mean, she gets there, but the conversation when she has when she speaks with M'Baku, and
Mhm.
he is all of a sudden the voice of reason, which you've really got to examine what's going on when he becomes the voice of reason in your younger. But where he's saying, you know, of course your mother was worth going to war for.
Yeah.
But that's not what she wanted for you.
Yeah.
And her response, my mom's dead. What she wanted for me, her hopes and dreams for me, they don't matter anymore because
Yeah.
she's gone. And like in that moment,
Exactly.
I'm like, I don't know what she's gonna do.
Right.
I mean, it's a Marvel movie, so I kind of had an idea of eventually what she was going to do. But in that moment, when
Right.
she delivers that line, you're questioning. I mean, she is ready to go to all out war. And quite frankly, if I was in her position, I'd probably be ready to go to all out war
Yeah.
with Namor as well, to take it out on somebody. She can't do anything about what happened with her dad, what happened with her brother, but she can do something to avenge her mom and to
Yeah.
avenge her kingdom. And I think she's ready to do that. Um, and then to have that moment, the same line
Yes.
that her mom delivered
Mhm.
to T'Challa and then deliver
Uh-huh.
it to her on the ancestral plane, that was
Show
a
him
powerful
who
moment.
you are. Yeah.
Well, going back to M'Baku for just a moment, it was interesting to see him and how he both did and did not change over that 5-year span.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the point where he still looks at the other Wakandans like, you fools are doing all of this that you don't need to do. But yeah, and he's still, he's not as high and mighty about it.
Right.
Right.
He's come to appreciate them as greater tribe, basically, as seen when they come to the Jabari lands, and he's not like, y'all on the clock, you gotta get step in and get out.
Like how you guys
But
get
he
anything done is amazing to me.
right. But watching that bit of growth for him was one thing, but watching the parallels of his relationship with Shuri versus his relationship with T'Challa, as like you said, the voice of reason at this point, and you need to think, not just act. You need to
Yeah.
have purpose, not just the power, and being able to talk her not even momentarily, talk her off the ledge,
Yeah.
that he's trying to talk her off the ledge and couldn't. But the fact that somebody had to, and really, I think that he was the only person, because she's not going to listen to the royal council at
Right.
all. The Dora are going to follow her because she's now effectively the crown princess. But I think that the fact that M'Baku, tried to be that voice of reason for her, and then watching when she finally dons the Panther habit and comes back, and well, we can't go to Warrior Falls. Somebody has to kind of challenge you, and they have that arm wrestling match in the middle of all the tribal council, and looking at him like, somebody's got to do it. All right, I'm the guy. And the fact that he knew that somebody had to be there to try to balance her rage and try to balance her emotional state at
Mm-hmm.
that point. And just watching how he then, and then at the end of the movie where, he's like, the Black Panther sensor regrets. And you're just like, oh, great. You can see M'Baku being M'Baku that we are kind of used to again. But watching that arc of him, that smaller, that we don't see as much of it on the screen, but watching it in just the scenes that he is in, the arc that he took as well, I thought was also really good.
I think the moment for me that kind of captures that, he's still Jabari that's kind of outside of Wakanda, but still part of Wakanda 100% and more part of Wakanda, is when they're standing there and they're saying, "Oh yeah, they brought back the princess." And, oh, the queen's probably gonna reward her with a lifetime banishment. Joking and kind of criticizing the queen. And then the water explosion, the boat tips over, and without hesitation, he jumps in to save this guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's where you kind of see, to me, that kind of embodied where he was, where he's still kind of an outsider, but he is now more a part of the larger Wakanda than they were before. And I think
Yeah.
um, I really enjoyed his character in this movie quite a bit.
I would have loved to see more of him, but I'm glad for what we got.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it feels like they're definitely setting up for more story with him.
Yeah.
Hopefully so. That would be great to see. I'd love to see how the Jabari live.
Yeah.
So now I'm not a big comics guy, but I know that Ironheart is incredibly popular. So I want to get your guys' take on the introduction of that character because we're getting a Disney Plus series coming. So have at it, boys.
I think I'll go first, Robert, and then I want to hear your take, obviously. But
Sure.
I think one of the biggest criticisms that I've seen is Riri's character in this because she's just kind of there, right? And
Mhm.
it's just to introduce her series. This does not bother me, and the reason it doesn't is because I have been reading comics for a lot of years, and this is how a lot of what become major characters show up in comics. They
Mm.
show up in a series that's not really related to, I mean, it is, and that's kind of their origin, but Wolverine, for example, Fantastic Four, where
This
Black
guy did.
Panther shows up, Wolverine shows up in Hulk, and for a couple of issues, and then that leads to him being who he is. You've got Cable shows up in the New Mutants. Like, it doesn't bother me because to me it's very much what it should be in a comic book type
Uh-huh.
world, is they kind of show up in this side story and then that's going to lead to their own series, and I'm totally fine with it. I really liked her character a lot, and that probably helped me not have any issues with her and her story arc. So I liked her.
What Jake said, no. I agree. No, I feel that she was underutilized. I felt that she was to a degree a MacGuffin.
Mhm.
Um, her story was adapted from this 15-year-old kid, Wunderkind, builds basically builds an Iron Man suit in her dorm
Mhm.
at MIT at 15. Now we get to see some of that with her Mark One frame that you had a little bit of screen time in, and you got to see it when Everett Ross is like, oh yeah, this kid in MIT built this vibranium detector machine because somebody said she could never make it work.
Right.
So we get the idea that okay, she's the smart kid.
Uh-huh.
I think that and I can understand not giving all of the secrets away because she's got a series coming up next year.
Right.
So, excuse me, getting to see her both in action and in the lab gives you an idea of who this kid is at heart. She's a tinkerer, she's an engineer, she's apparently really, really smart.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I mean, quite frankly, I would love to see something where we see Shuri and Riri has become like the new science sisters
Yeah.
Yeah.
and kind of take on the Bruce and Tony role with possibly with Bruce as like advisor or
Mhm.
just
Right.
some guy they talk to just to go like to go, that's nice that you came up with that. We're gonna go do this stuff now and make it work.
Yeah.
Kind of like Shuri talks to Bruce in Infinity War when they were talking about the
Right.
Vision. I like, I appreciated getting to see her. I know there's been criticisms about her armor,
Uh-huh.
her Mark II armor, but I'm thinking if you go from being a college student who's working with scraps, who built it in a shop in a cave with scraps,
Yeah.
she's literally Tony Stark working in a mechanic shop with
Right.
whatever she can grab, which they also brought up with the first vibranium detector that she
Right.
made. It was like, because the story's like, some of this is fantastic, some of this is like she went to a scrapyard to get. So she is creative in her engineering.
Right.
But when you go from working at the scrapyard to I have the resources of the wealthiest nation in the country and
Mhm.
an AI that can build it and all of this stuff, you get the armor that we saw.
Right.
And I can see where some people are like, it doesn't look like Iron Man armor. I don't want it to.
I
Right.
agree.
I want it to look like something that a teenager
Mhm.
would go, Iron Man did that pretty well, but I want to add this and this or do this. And then you also get to add in, excuse me, the Wakandan factor. So you get the suit that we got, which that we don't got.
Yeah, she doesn't get to keep it, which is
And I'm wondering if that's red herring for later, or Chekhov's gun for later, where Shuri's like, okay,
here you
go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Well-
one of my favorite things about her character in this is the interactions between her and Shuri, because she was the one character that Shuri could kind of let her hair down in a sense and just be a normal kid. The fact that they greet each other with yo all the time and they're very casual and comfortable around each other. Shuri doesn't have a lot of friends. I mean, she has a lot of people that care about her and want
she's
the
the
best for
princess.
her, but
Yeah.
she doesn't
Right.
have someone that like, hey, let's hang out and like
Just chill and
just chill out. And she gets that with Riri. Is that
Mm-hmm.
Riri? She gets it with Riri, and I like that. I liked seeing their interactions for that reason, because Shuri needs that. I mean,
She does, and especially now.
yeah. And
Well,
so I
and
would
one of
love
the
to
other
see, like you
things,
said, Robert, I'd love to see that relationship continue to develop in future projects.
and I don't need it to be in every movie or every episode
No.
kind of thing. Even if it's just like shooting somebody a text message or something, just like, hey, by the way, blah, and it's like just to know that that connection is still there.
yeah.
But the other thing with Riri that I thought was hilarious, that I'm sure that many other people in the theater when we saw it, Jake, didn't get, was when they introduced her. I'm sorry, not when they introduced her. When Shuri follows her back to her dorm room,
Uh-huh.
and she's trying to say, you need to come with me, and Riri's like, why are you following me? And then Okoye comes out,
Mhm.
and then she starts bagging on Okoye like, I know you're not talking like all that stuff, like that ash on your head. I'm sure that nobody in our audience knew what that was about. I almost fell out of my chair because it was very much a black culture reference.
Mhm.
Just like, and Okoye's reaction was like, oh, what? I thought you told me that I looked fine. And Story's trying to talk her down. It's just like, well done. Just one thing, just a quick throw in that is, again, a cultural reference that isn't for everybody. I thought was perfect.
But it doesn't alienate. It's not like everybody's going, I mean, it just passes by most people or a lot of people.
Yeah.
But those that get it. And I love the line too when Shuri is like, you've built all this in your dorm here, and she's like, yeah, to be young and fabulous and black, am I right? And I was just like, that's a great line.
Well, then when she follows that up with, you probably don't say that in Wakanda, because
The little asides like that, I think, were perfect. I think the writing staff nailed, and I think that Dominique Thorne and Letitia Wright and Denai Guerrera in that moment captured the generation gap, captured the cultural gap, captured the commonalities of culture in that 3-minute scene so well.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I really liked her character. I like Ironheart. I'm on board with the series.
I'm interested to see the
So if
series.
the point of having her in this was to get me on board with the series, for me, mission accomplished. And I don't feel like it took away from the main story, even though, they could have accomplished a lot of the same stuff without her character being there, but it didn't distract from it, I felt like. So
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like you said, with comics, you and I are kind of used to the character pops up here, disappears for like a year, and then shows up again over here in an entirely different title, doing something similar in most cases. But I mean, we've had that before. We've had it with a number of characters, and especially in this movie, we had it with Val Delafontaine, the FBI director, who first appears in Captain America and the Winter Soldier. Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
And she pops up there, and you're like, well, okay, that's something. And now you see that she's got a larger role, and we know that going forward she's going to have an even larger role with the Thunderbolts.
Yep. Yeah, and I don't know what the organization is called that she's, I mean, I know it's the CIA right now, but I don't know behind the scenes what she's representing, if it's Hydra or an offshoot or whatever it's going to be, but she's going to be forming Thunderbolts, and it's going to be covert. And I mean, her being here, in some ways it's kind of like, that's interesting. But in other ways, it's like, no, this makes sense, because if you were trying to accomplish what I think she's trying to accomplish, then getting into the CIA and and getting in as the director is the place where you are going to want this individual to be, because she's going to be able to find those superhumans and beings and things like that she wants to recruit into this Thunderbolts group. And I think it makes a lot of sense. Her being his ex-wife was a little bit weird. I'm not sure I really needed that part, but her being in it didn't bother me. So
agreed.
But
I was going to say, unfortunately, Valerie had internet issues, and so she wasn't able to join us. So sorry, Val, but she did say she liked the movie.
If you're watching the video, she popped in for a minute and you got to see her on video, but internet issues, and unfortunately, and we're sorry about that, Val, because I know she would love to be here to talk about this movie. So
yeah,
this just means we have to do a second one now.
Yeah, well,
there's enough to talk about. We didn't get to everything.
Yeah, we didn't really get to talk about Namor's city or the fact that he's a mutant, and they just flat out say that he's a mutant. That's huge.
That's the second time.
Yeah.
Kamala was the first.
It's actually the first time, because the other was like mutation. There's a mutation in your blood.
Yeah.
So this is the first time they actually come out and said mutant. And you're like, oh, they exist finally.
And
but that does bring up one thing with Namor that I didn't care for. It's the 400 years old part.
Yeah.
And I think that it gave him a great perspective on surface society and what he truly didn't like about it. But in the comics, granted, he's been around since Captain America's time, so he's roughly 100-ish years old, which I think for me is enough. But I think that the 400 was a bit much, but I didn't write the story, so I'm not going to complain. And I think that what they did with him, given that change, didn't break anything.
Right.
It was just different.
Yeah, it fit with the narrative that they were telling and the character that they were building. But I agree, he didn't need to be that old, but it works and it's fine. It's not a deal breaker for me. But I do think it's a nice nod that he's kind of the first mutant, flat out saying he's a mutant, because since he's been around in the comics for so long, he kind of is the first mutant.
Marvel finally came around and admitted that he was, and then they backtracked and made it Apocalypse in the X-Men.
Yeah.
But for a while there, they actually built Namor as Marvel's first mutant.
Yeah, but now Apocalypse predates him by a ton and whatever. But but it's Apocalypse is a different kind of mutant, because anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, we'll just leave that alone. That's another episode entirely.
But I am wondering, and this was a thought that I had, and this is going to get super nerdy comics wise, but I am wondering, because we've got the heart-shaped herb that is because it's in vibranium rich soil. Then we've got the plant that Namor's people took that was also in vibranium rich soil, and so it had those properties. That's what turned him into a mutant. So I'm wondering if we're tying that into how mutants kind of come into being. But with the plant piece, I can't help but think a little bit of Krakoa. And if we're going to get there sooner than later with the X-Men.
Curse you, Jake. Now you're making me think.
I don't know. I mean, it's far off in my mind. Like it took us 60 years to get there in the comics, so I don't know that we could really get there in like 2 movies. But I couldn't help but think of it, and it could just be a coincidence. But anyway, it was interesting. Sorry, Robert.
I can't twirl my mustache. Well, no, that's an interesting thought. I don't think that you could do it in the Atlantic, because I think that Namor and the Talokans would have noticed something.
Right.
Krakoa has traditionally been in the Pacific. If the meteor that crashed in Talokan or in the Gulf came across the peninsula, which would have to do to make it all the way to Africa and in that arc, or trajectory wise, then I could see a fragment of it breaking off, dropping into some island, and then some uncharted island.
I can just go with Shuri's explanation, where she said there could have been more than one meteorite. The Earth's covered mostly in water, so it's possible there's another one that landed in the Pacific.
Yep.
I don't know. It was just a thought
I never thought about that. That's actually really curses. It's fun to think about now. Thanks, Greg.
It's fun to think about. That's what I love about these movies is they throw in stuff, and some of it is on purpose, and some of it, as fanboys, we just kind of go deep, and we're like, well, maybe it's this, and then then you start seeing Mephisto everywhere. Ty,
in honor of Ty, I think that the meteorite just ties into Mephisto.
Of course.
It's all Mephisto's fault.
Sure, he's going to be the new Ghost Rider.
I would pay to see that. Oh, it should be Ghost Rider. It should be like Ghost Panther. There we go.
There you go. Ghost Panther.
She just shows up and starts burning everything.
So we need to give this movie a grade.
Okay.
That's what we do on the show.
Val says she would have gone a B+ on this. That's probably where I'm going to be. I need to see it again. I'm kind of in the B+ A- range. I felt like I liked the fact that we had time for these characters to grieve and to talk. But it just felt a little long to me. So if they could have tightened it up just a hair more, it would have improved it. But the performances were amazing. I thought honored Chadwick in wonderful ways, sets up future Avengers with Ironheart and with possibly T'Challa's son. We get Namor, and he didn't necessarily become the good guy. He's still very much a wild card, and his people are as well. So he could kind of continue to play that anti-hero role. So yeah, that's where I'm going to land. What about you, Jake?
For me, it's an A-. I think this may get. Afterward, I gave a comment to the people that were running it. So we went to a special screening. It was a pre-screening. We're very grateful to the studios for sending that to us and allowing us to come and participate in that. They asked for a comment at the end. I said this might be my top 3 Marvel movies now.
Okay.
On the second viewing, right before I went and saw the second viewing, I read a critique of it, a critic's review of it that was probably more critical than I typically am with movies. And so I kind of watched for some of the things that they pointed out, and I'll be honest, it wasn't there for me. I really like this movie, and I think it's really, really well done. So I'm sticking with an A-. Is it top 3? I don't know. I need to go back and watch the old top 3 and see if this does beat them out. But I really appreciated this movie a lot.
Wow. So I had this conversation at work on Thursday after seeing it, or a limited version of it. So it was like, how was it? How does it measure up? And for me, it is a very worthy successor to the first movie. I think that you have a narrative that is a single thread, despite moving through other movies, despite the characters appearing in other movies and shows. It is still a single narrative thread that holds together to make an out-of-universe correlation. Superman and the Donner cut of Superman 2. As that being one narrative thread. Along those lines, it holds up well. I am not sure which one I prefer, actually. I, again, need to see it, like both of you need to see it again, just to kind of feel out a couple of things. But I think that the first one still edges it out for me. So I am in the A-, B+ range, but I think I'm going to have to go B+.
Okay. Yeah, I don't feel like it was quite as good as the first one, but it's really good. It's definitely a worthy successor.
But it's also an entirely different movie. It feels like a different movie because the first movie was the origin story, the who is this guy? What is he dealing with? And this one is he's no longer here.
Yeah.
How do we deal with that? And the emotional roller coaster in this movie was an emotional roller coaster. No doubt about it.
Yeah,
from beginning to end.
We talked about how heavy it is, but there's some really lighthearted moments and some great action scenes. There's some really well choreographed and edited fight scenes, which was great.
It's interesting when you talk about the first one. I think one of the things that the first one did really, really well, and you mentioned it being an origin story for the Black Panther, but it's really an origin story for Wakanda and all of what Wakanda is and the culture and everything.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that it did that so well and so strongly in the first one, because that made it possible to make this movie what it was.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Because we already were bought in to Wakanda and the people and the characters outside of just T'Challa. And so it was easy to still say, I want to be there. I'll pay the $15 for a movie ticket to sit and watch it because I'm already invested in these characters from the first movie, which is awesome.
Agreed. And again, in the same way that they introduced not just the characters of the Black Panther and his co-stars, but this one I think did the same thing in a much more limited way for Namor and the Talokan, because that scene where they swam through and you get to see day-to-day life for these people. It's like it's a much more limited version, but it's the same kind of thing. So like I would love to see more of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I don't know, although I don't know if I want Talokan forever.
No, I don't know either. Namor was an intriguing character, but like you said, Tracy, he doesn't end up being the good guy. And even at the end, he's got to sell what he did in a way that I'm like, he's just kind of sleazy, and I just don't like him, which is fine because that's how I feel about him in the comics too. So I'm totally okay with that, but I don't want a movie about him. I want him to pop up and keep being a player in the universe, but I don't need a movie.
I'm going to give you a counter to that.
Okay.
I actually kind of want, I don't know if I want a movie or a series to flesh this out. What if Namor's not the worst one? What if Namora and Atuma make a power play and Namor then has to be the lesser of two evils? Not necessarily a good guy by any stretch, but you can tell that they were not satisfied with the way that resolved.
No,
yep,
I could totally see that happening. Yeah, I could. I would be there for that. Maybe. I don't know.
You know what? I'll take the maybe. I'll take that.
Here's the thing. If Marvel puts out a movie, Robert, I'm going to go see it. So it doesn't really matter. I'm there for it regardless. But I may be more excited about it than if it's just, hey, let's
swim. Whee!
Yeah, exactly. I did love that she pulled out one of his wings, though. That was one of my favorite parts of the whole movie. All right. There's so much that we can talk about. We could go on for hours and hours, but we do have to wrap this up. Thank you, Robert, for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me.
It. Your knowledge on comics and the history of the Marvel universe and everything is just, it brings so much to this show that it's just so much better when you're here. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anytime, I'm happy to be here.
Not next, but this Friday, we are going to be at the Midway. Please come join us. We are going to have so much fun. We are going to be raffling off prizes. We are going to be doing Disney trivia. We will not be answering the questions. We'll be asking the questions. So you do have a fair shot against Tracy, Val, and me, because I think together we would be a pretty powerful Disney trivia team. I'll be honest.
That's true. With our powers combined, yes.
Yeah. So
you're Captain Disney?
We're the Disneys.
Yeah.
Like the Marvel.
I stand corrected.
Yeah.
Please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't, or follow us on wherever you listen to us with podcasts. Leave a review. We always appreciate that. And make sure that you like this video and share this video. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time, we won't see you at the movies.
Bye.
Bye.
This has been an Age of Geek media production.